is the only state in Nigeria that has fully adopted e-governance, ensuring that government correspondences are paperless. Its innovative policies and programs include the basic education sector transformation called Edo Best, tackling learning through poverty, tackling poverty through technology, and also utilizing the public-private partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to just give a round of applause for His Excellency Governor Godwin Obaseki of Edo State.
Thank you very, very much. Let me start first by appreciating all you guys who've organized this forum or this session. I tell you, I'm not impressed as how young Africans can put this event together outline. So congratulations. This morning or this afternoon, I'm expected to put together, I'll tell you in 10 minutes what we've achieved in 8 years. So let's see how we'll do it. So if I rush through my presentation, I don't worry. We have 5 minutes and sometime later to discuss areas I may not have covered. So this afternoon, I'm expected to talk about how we can grow our continent and how we have, in a little way, done it in Edo State since I became governor. You know the story of Africa. Africa is full of immense potentials. We stand at the intersection of global trade. We have a very young population. We have great economic prospects, huge natural resources, and on and on. It's not new. But I guess what we are trying to put hands around is the paradox of Africa. Yes, we have a very young population, very dynamic. It's a blessing, but if we don't manage it right, as we've seen in many African countries, it's becoming a problem. We can't find jobs for them, and we can engage them. We are beginning to see, in spite of the resources we have, enormous poverty. And we need to navigate this paradox. And for us, I believe that the way to deal with this paradox and grow our continent, first, we must focus on rebuilding our institutions. We're all here. This has been around for over a century. How many institutions do we have on our continent that we can boldly say we've grown in time? I guess the most important thing we should be focused on, which we're doing here today, and which makes me really glad, is about human capacity. It's us humans, us Africans, that will make that change that will recur on our continent. We've got to provide infrastructure and ensure that we take advantage of the competitive advantages we have as a people. How have we tried to deal with issues in Edo State? Like I said, Edo is just representative of the continent. Young people, 5 million people, 2/3 of them young, very young, under the age of 30. We're becoming highly urbanized. We have an average size GDP relative to the rest of the country. We have about 18, 19 million square hectares of farmland, very rich. But, in the context of the world, we're still very poor. So what have we, in the last 7 years, we've tried to grow that $11 billion GDP. Today, it's almost $25 billion. How did we do it? Just focusing, like I said, on institutions. Focusing on governments, because we've got to, only governments can help us organize ourselves. We've reformed our civil service by first rebuilding the infrastructure, cleaning the processes, and then digitizing the way government works. So today, from my desktop, there's really no data I want, most data I want from government is available. But more importantly, we've worked on the human beings, the civil servants, given them a sense of pride, made them respected, and more importantly, begin to understand that they have to be well remunerated. So a few weeks ago, I announced the highest minimum wage in the country. And for me, even that is still inadequate, because as you say, if you pay pennies, what do you get? You get lemons. So, big issues around governance are how you manage your fiscal space, how you manage your people, how you manage your fiscal space, and government has the responsibility to do this. So, focusing on the bureaucracy is key. Secondly, you've got to, why do you focus on the bureaucracy? Not for the bureaucracy itself, but for the bureaucracy to help people realize their potentials. Government is there, is supposed to work for us, citizens. And to do that, you've got to have clarity that government's role is not to build the economy directly. Government's role is to create the enabling environment to help citizens achieve their goals. So we've emphasized things to do with creating an enabling environment, making sure there's security, peace, and order, that you have seamless ways of collecting fair taxes from citizens, and on and on. And then also repositioning government to carry out its principal function, which is regulatory. Government is not a business person. Government cannot do it. Government is doing very, very bad business. So, but government needs to understand that and step back and create an environment for people to make money. For us, coming from our unfortunate incident of military rule, where the military saw people who had independence, who were either academics or business people, as threats, because they could sponsor coups, they de-emphasized that role of government helping citizens to become rich. And this is real at the core of any growth, any economic growth we expect. The human capacity. It's people that make things happen. So government's responsibility must be to focus on the people. And key to this is education. Almost all governments all over the world say that basic education is free, and in most cases compulsory. But we, when we came into government, understood that it was not about schooling. Education is just not about schooling. It's about learning. So we decided to deliberately begin a process where first we had focused on foundational education. And I said, look, if I had 100 naira or $100 to spend on education, I'll spend $40 on foundational education, on basic education. And that's what we've done in the last 7 years. And you can see the transformation in the case. So the children in our school system today learn at about 70 to 80% of, at the same rate as their peers in Britain or in America. The other thing is education for what? For us, somehow we got, I don't know why we got it wrong, I thought to believe that it's education for certificates, education to be employed. But we said no. It can't be education for certificates. It's education to make you useful to yourself and to society, to make you to be able to employ yourself and sustain yourself. The other issue we had to focus on was, yes, we got it wrong at some point. We have a generation or two who were not as well educated as they should have been. What do we do with them? We then focused on just remediation, creating vocational opportunities. So when I came in 2016, we had a crisis. We had a human crisis. At some point, the International Office of Migration approached me, I think it was January 2017, and said, do you know that you have over 30,000 young Edo boys and girls in Libya trying to cross over to Europe. I said, what? 50,000? Can you imagine how many would have died on that journey across the Sahara? So it was a humanitarian crisis where young people didn't want to stay at home anywhere else but home. They all wanted to travel. So, we're top of the list on human trafficking, top of the list in terms of irregular migration out of the country. That was the signal. And that's why we had to begin to work. By the time we started with repatriating them and getting the data and trying to understand the root causes, we just realized that it was because the educational system had broken and these kids could not see a future. The other thing we had to do, and I believe the rest of Africa must do, for us to get, to achieve the level of growth we need, is we must invest in infrastructure. And two critical infrastructure, beyond roads and bridges, is power, electricity, and digital. We are lucky because of the location of Edo State. We are right there at the core of infrastructure in the country. And so we're the cheapest point to generate electricity because we have both the transmission grid and the gas grid running across our state. So today we supply, we account for almost 12-13% of the power in the national grid. But more importantly, we have gas, onshore gas, and we've been able to encourage investments to produce power. So we have IPPs running most of our services in the state. But the thing that's significant in the last 3 years, we have built almost 2,000 kilometers of fiber across the state, connecting the state, such that we now have adequate infrastructure to deliver government services across the nooks and corners of the state. We're just now currently building an additional 300 kilometers to connect schools and primary health facilities, so that we can deliver services, remotely. We can deliver telemedicine services to, kids and kin in the rural areas. And lastly, so there's so many things government is expected to do, but you can't do everything at the same time. So you just select what are those key things, key activities that are catalytic. And for us, it's manufacturing, because you've got to produce what you consume. This dependency on the outside can sustain us. And fortunately, since we have, sufficient or adequate energy resources, particularly gas, why not, sweat these assets so that you can generate enough power to have competitive manufacturing. So it's about your people, so you don't have to import people, and you don't have to import power. And the other thing that makes us really, really unique as a people is our culture. We are the home of those bronzes that are being contested globally. The home of a Benin Empire. And nobody else has that. And we say to ourselves, there is a huge economic opportunity. So if we get back our stolen artifacts, we can now begin to explain to the world the civilization we have that helped build what we built before the coming of the Europeans. And that is something we can sell, which is unique. So we'll focus on that. So let me just quickly try and round up as I have 10 minutes. I've talked about manufacturing. We've talked about, the investors that have been attracted, trying to use things, use what's available, particularly cassava as energy sources. We, talked about, how we've encouraged people to come and invest and come and produce, particularly small businesses. They need, locations, they need power, they need policy to support what they're doing. And talked about, culture, where we have now designated a whole cultural district. We're building a museum for West African arts. We're a very active archaeological site. As I speak, thanks to the support of Oxford University and a few others. And hopefully, before I leave office in November, we'll have completed the first phase of this museum, which will serve as a storage facility, which It will serve as a storage facility for collections. Like I said, we're currently doing a lot of archaeological work, and we've worked with the Benin Dialogue Group to help support the activities to make sure that Edo, Benin City, becomes a hub for culture in West Africa. So, to conclude, I said first, governments in themselves cannot accomplish much. They have to accomplish what they set out to do, working with citizens. In Edo, we have prioritized strategic partnerships. Everything we've done, everything we've achieved is based on how we've created an environment to work with partners on a strategic level, on a strategic basis. And this is how we've driven the work we've done today. So whether it's in the area of technology or skills development, that's the array of partners we've had to work with, across board. Whether it's in education, in the area of agriculture, finance, banking, we're very big with international donors. In manufacturing and small businesses. In arts, culture, media. In healthcare, in infrastructure. In construction, and others. So you can see there was no way as government we would have done it, achieved what we have achieved if we did not create a template and create a structure to work with the private sector and the multilateral and other organizations. So it's about partnerships. And therefore, if we're going to chart a new path for Africa, we must now organize our governments at a national, subnational, and sub-subnational levels. The priority number one must be what we're doing here. Because you Africans must be trained. We must train ourselves, train Africans, both abroad and at home, to acquire, skills and excellence. You cannot survive or exist in today's world or be sustainable without technology. Not technology for itself, but technology to take you or take us where we need to go to. And lastly, in doing all of this, we must never forget who we are. We are Africans. And our goal must be to let the world know that we are like any other groups in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Welcome you back, Governor, just to come and we'll have a conversation with you. If you can just come back upstairs and we can have a conversation. Yes, we'll sit together and talk through. Is the Slido up for people to ask some questions? I'll just sit on your side. Okay. All right, so while we're waiting for the take team to put the Slido up, that was a very insightful conversation that we had there. You talked about, the paradox that we have having a young population, a surging youthful population. You also, talked about the oxymoron of how we are so rich yet so poor, but you also encouraged us to, utilize our competitive advantage of, using manufacturing, using our culture. So all those are great things that you brought up in your talk. So if any of you have questions, please scan the Slido and put your questions out there. But Kennedy, coming from the same state, what did you think about that conversation, that talk?
Oh yeah, I was pretty impressed by how you talked about the flow of migration in those states and how there are problems with Libya as well. I think the question that I have in focusing on that is that knowing that Edo State in some ways opposed with human trafficking and also the dire conditions that are apparent in terms of migration flows, what is the government and which you in leadership doing to, in some ways, curb that at the point where there is this narrative that for you to find development and for you to find human mobility and growth, you need to go to Italy or you need to go to Libya. People take that dire risk in crossing the Mediterranean. And so how is it those states becoming a front runner in terms of dialing that back a bit?
Yes, I think that's the purpose of my talk. That in 7 years we've reversed that trend from Edo State being the leading state in Nigeria, where young people just emigrate from, to 7 years after, where we are not top 10 anymore, where we've seen a situation where people no longer want to go out. People are now heading back home because we've created an enabling environment, much safer environment, opportunities for young people. We have this agency, the Skills Development Agency, Edo Jobs, that has either mentored, supported, skilled, and placed almost 200,000 young men and women in the last 7 years. So the situation we have today is rather than seeing, migration out, we're now seeing a lot of migration in because people are coming to look for opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Governor. Earlier today we were talking about integrating Africa, and Honorable Raila Odinga talked about how he's running for the AU. So there's a question that has come in for you, saying you have done great with international partnerships, but what are you doing to promote local partnerships and investments?
I think there's been more local partnerships, particularly at some of them, yeah. Take a whole reskilling of the civil service and public service. What did we do? We had to call in experts. I have Joaba DI, okay, he has international experience, our partners here, but he's local, he's in Abuja. Himself and his team have come in to help us work through a whole training program for our public servants. We have the John Odigarebu Public Service Academy, where we tool and reskill our public servants. Most of our technology implementation, the eGov platform we use in Edo today, because we're paperless government, was developed locally. The ERP was developed locally by local partners. I can't recall, except for multilateral organizations like the World Bank, I'll say most of our initiatives, most of the support we've gotten have been local.
All right, so we'll just wrap it up. Maybe you could just give us some concluding remarks on this. You've told us about the Edo model, which sounds great, but how replicable is this in other places as well?
So that's what I'm saying. What's the model? The model for growth is you have to focus on government. You've got to retool and reskill government. And in doing so, you've got to get the people who run government, us politicians, bureaucrats, to begin to think differently about the services they offer. That government does not act for itself. Government does not exist for itself. Government exists for the citizens. So the government cannot be seen to have done well if the citizens are not doing it. Because that's the first, and I think it's replicable across the board, whether it's local, whether it's state or federal. The second, which is a corollary to that, is that government is about people. It's about solving people's problems, solving the citizens' problems, making sure citizens are educated, they have good health care, they have water, and whatever else they need to live happy lives. And to do that, you've got to train people, you've got to build their capacity from birth. In fact, what's most important is focusing on basic education, foundational learning. Right? It's great to be here, to be in Oxford, but if you didn't have strong foundational learning, you won't be here. So you see how many more people, how many more Africans we can create if we just focus on foundational learning. And then also skills. To say, look, you are educated means that you can help yourself. You can feed yourself. You can use your hands. Not looking for work or working in businesses someone else from some parts of the world have created. And then lastly, that everything you need to live, everything you're looking for outside the rest of the world, you also have. Just look inwards and use your hands.
Oh, beautiful.
Right.
Use your hands indeed. Thank you so much, Godwin. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your great leadership presence, for your discourse on human capacity in culture and agriculture. We welcome you to Oxford and we wish you luck in your tenure. Thank you.
All right, another round of applause for the governor as he makes his way down. Amazing, amazing. So we are moving on to the next part of our program. We have the Vice Chancellor in our presence. So the Vice Chancellor will be coming up to give a speech, and after she gives her speech, we'll go straight into the pitching. So for the people pitching, please be ready